The coffee shop fell silent the moment Caleb Hart stood up, not to leave, but to face the three women who'd spent the last 10 minutes tearing apart a pregnant stranger sitting across from him. His hands shook. His voice didn't. "You don't know her story," he said, each word cutting through the whispers like a blade. "And you sure as hell don't know mine." The entire room held its breath. 7 months pregnant, 26 years old, and abandoned by the father of her child, Nora Lane had walked into this blind date expecting rejection. What she got instead was a man who'd spent years hiding from conflict, finally done running. If you want to see how far a single moment of courage can travel, stay with me until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see where this story reaches. And if it moves you, hit that like button. Caleb Hart had mastered the art of emotional escape long before he turned 32. He could smile through interrogations from his mother about why he wasn't dating. He could nod through his sister's lectures about putting himself out there. He could even endure the pitying looks from married friends who treated his divorce like a contagious disease. But sitting in the back corner of Ravenswood Grounds, a trendy coffee shop on Chicago's north side, waiting for a blind date he'd been ambushed into, Caleb had reached his limit. "Just meet her," his mother had said 3 days ago, cornering him at Sunday dinner while his 5-year-old son Miles colored at the table. "She's a sweet girl, teacher, 26, just your type." Caleb had tried to refuse. He'd tried to explain that he wasn't ready, that between single parenting and his demanding job as a civil engineer, he barely had time to sleep, let alone date. But his mother had deployed the nuclear option, the look, the one that said, "I raised you better than to let loneliness win." So here he sat, nursing a black coffee that had gone cold, checking his watch every 45 seconds, and rehearsing his exit strategy. 15 minutes. That's all he owed this situation. 15 polite minutes, then a fabricated emergency involving Miles, then freedom. The door chimed. Caleb glanced up, force of habit, nothing more, and felt his carefully constructed plan disintegrate. The woman who walked through the door was beautiful in a way that didn't announce itself. Soft brown hair pulled into a practical ponytail, clear hazel eyes scanning the room with cautious intelligence. A cream-colored sweater that looked warm and lived in. She moved with the careful grace of someone used to navigating tight spaces, and she was 7 months pregnant. Caleb's brain stuttered. This couldn't be her. This had to be a coincidence. Women came to coffee shops all the time. Pregnant women drank decaf. This was Chicago in February. Half the population was bundled up and seeking warmth. The odds that this particular woman was his blind date were... She made eye contact. Recognition flickered across her face. Hesitant, almost apologetic. And Caleb understood with sinking certainty that his mother had spectacularly failed to mention a crucial detail. The woman approached his table. Up close, Caleb could see the exhaustion embedded in the fine lines around her eyes, the way her shoulders carried a tension that had nothing to do with the physical weight she bore. "Caleb?" Her voice was softer than he expected. Steadier, too. "Yeah." He stood up too fast, nearly knocking over his coffee. "You must be..." "Nora." She didn't offer her hand. Smart. The table between them provided necessary distance. "Nora Lane." For 5 excruciating seconds, neither of them moved. The coffee shop hummed around them, espresso machine hissing, indie folk playing low through overhead speakers, conversations blending into white noise. But in their corner, time had frozen, waiting for someone to make the first move. Caleb could feel eyes on them. Not everyone was staring, but enough people had noticed. Enough people had done the math. Youngish man, very pregnant woman, first meeting energy. The whispers hadn't started yet, but they would. Every instinct Caleb possessed screamed at him to run. This was the reasonable response, the socially acceptable one. He could apologize, claim confusion, retreat with his dignity and tact. His mother would be furious, but she'd been furious before. He could survive her disappointment. What he couldn't survive was another failure. The thought arrived unbidden, sharp as a knife between ribs. Caleb had spent the last 3 years running, from his marriage, from confrontation, from anything that required him to be vulnerable. His ex-wife Rebecca had said it during their final argument, the one that had ended with her throwing his wedding ring at his chest. "You'd rather disappear than fight for anything." She'd been right, but standing here watching Nora's expression cycle through resignation and something darker, shame maybe, or just bone-deep weariness, Caleb made a choice that surprised himself. He pulled out the chair across from him. "Please," he said. "Sit." Nora blinked. Whatever she'd been expecting, it wasn't this. "You don't have to cut." "I know." Caleb met her eyes. "Sit anyway." She studied him for a long moment, searching for the trap. Finding none, she carefully lowered herself into the chair, one hand automatically moving to support her belly. The gesture was so natural it spoke of months of practice. Silence stretched between them again, but this time it felt less hostile. More like two people standing at the edge of a cliff trying to decide if jumping was brave or just stupid. "Your mother didn't tell you." Nora's words weren't a question. "No?" Caleb felt anger flicker at his mother, at this situation, at the unfairness of it all, then forced it down. Anger was easy, honesty was harder. "She said you were a teacher. 26. That's it." "I am a teacher." Nora's chin lifted slightly, defiant. "Preschool. I've been doing it for 4 years. I'm good at it." "I believe you." "And I'm 26. I'll be 27 in April." "Okay. And I'm 7 months pregnant with a baby whose father decided he wanted nothing to do with either of us the day I told him." The words landed like stones in still water. Nora delivered them without emotion, but Caleb could hear the weight beneath, months of having to explain, to justify, to defend choices that weren't even hers. "I didn't ask your mother to set this up," Nora continued. Her hands had folded on the table, fingers laced tight. "She approached me at the preschool. She has a friend whose granddaughter's in my class. We got talking. I mentioned I was single. She mentioned you. I thought—" A bitter laugh escaped her. "I thought she knew. I thought she was the kind of person who didn't care." "She probably doesn't," Caleb said quietly. "She just forgot to tell me because in her mind it doesn't matter." "But it matters to you." It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. Caleb considered lying, considered saying something smooth and noble about how he didn't judge, how everyone deserved a chance, how the circumstances didn't define the person. But Nora was looking at him with eyes that had clearly developed a finely tuned bullshit detector. "It matters," he admitted, "not because of what you think." "Then why?" He took a breath. When was the last time he told the truth about this to anyone? Not the sanitized version he fed his family, not the vague explanations he offered when colleagues asked about his divorce. The actual truth. "Because I'm a coward," Caleb said. "And walking into a coffee shop to meet a woman my mother set me up with was already pushing my limits. Seeing you pregnant, seeing everyone in here watching us, making assumptions, it triggered every instinct I have to run away from complicated situations." Nora's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. Less defensive, more curious. "Why didn't you?" she asked. "Run?" "Yeah." Caleb looked down at his cold coffee. "Because I have a son. Miles. He's 5. And 3 days ago he asked me why I always leave rooms when people start arguing." The words hung in the air between them. "I didn't have a good answer," Caleb continued. "I told him sometimes it's better to walk away than fight. He asked if that's why Mommy left, and His voice cracked slightly. "I realized he was learning from me, learning that when things get hard, you disappear." Nora was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had lost its edge. "That's not cowardice. That's self-awareness." "Maybe. Or maybe it's just a coward trying to sound deep." The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "You want to know what I thought when I walked in and saw you?" "Probably that you'd been set up. I thought you looked terrified." Nora leaned back slightly, her hand moving in slow circles over her belly, like someone had dropped you in the middle of the ocean and told you to swim. "And I thought, good, at least he's honest about it. As opposed to every other guy who's tried to date me since I started showing." Her voice hardened. "The ones who pretend they're fine with it, who act all enlightened and progressive, then ghost. The second things feel real. Or the ones who think pregnant equals desperate, like I should be grateful for any attention." Caleb felt something twist in his chest. "That's happened?" "More than once." Nora's gaze drifted to the window, watching February wind rattle bare tree branches. "Turns out there are 2 kinds of men who want to date a pregnant woman. The ones with a fetish, and the ones with a savior complex. What about the ones who are just trying not to screw up a coffee date? She looked back at him.
Haven't met one yet.
First time for everything. This time she did smile, small, cautious, but genuine. You're not what I expected. Back at you. The barista called out an order. Someone's phone rang. The normal sounds of the coffee shop rushed back in, reminding Caleb that they weren't actually alone, despite how the last few minutes had felt. Nora must have felt it too, because her expression shuddered slightly, walls rebuilding. Look, I appreciate you not bolting, but you don't owe me anything. I'm not here to trap anyone or... I'm divorced, Caleb interrupted. Finalized 2 years ago. We were married for 6 years. It ended because I wouldn't talk to her, wouldn't fight with her, just withdrew every time she needed me to be present. Nora stopped mid-sentence. I have primary custody of my son, Caleb continued, the words coming faster now, like a dam breaking. Not because I fought for it, because Rebecca knew she couldn't give him stability. She travels for work. She loves Miles, but she's not built for the daily grind of parenting. So I get him Monday through Friday. She gets weekends twice a month. That must be hard. It's lonely. The admission surprised him. I spend all week with a 5-year-old who thinks I hung the moon. Then I spend weekends alone wondering if I'm doing any of this right. My family means well, but they don't get it. My friends are all married with normal lives. And dating, he laughed, sharp and humorless. Dating is a minefield when you're a single dad who can't commit to plans more than 3 days out. Nora was watching him carefully now, and Caleb realized he'd just vomited his entire emotional landscape onto the table between them. Heat crept up his neck. Sorry, he muttered. That was honest, Nora finished. That was honest. They sat in the weight of their respective truths for a moment. Then Nora said, His name was David. We dated for 8 months. I thought he was the one. You know that feeling? Where everything just fits? He was smart, funny, had his life together, worked in finance. I was teaching. He was climbing the corporate ladder. We talked about the future. Caleb listened, sensing this was important. I got pregnant on accident, Nora continued, her voice steady but quiet. We were careful, but nothing's perfect. When I told him, he said all the right things for about 48 hours. Then he said he needed time to think. Then he said he wasn't ready to be a father. Then he stopped returning my calls. Jesus. His friends told me later he'd moved to New York. New job, fresh start. He sent me a check, $25,000, with a note saying he hoped it helped and he didn't want to be contacted again. Caleb felt anger surge, hot and protective. That's legal, Nora said flatly. I checked. As long as he doesn't contest paternity and agrees to termination of parental rights, the money counts as settlement. I cashed it, used it for medical bills and to move into a better apartment. Because I'm not stupid. I'm a preschool teacher in Chicago. I need every advantage I can get. That doesn't make you materialistic. That makes you smart. Tell that to his mother. Nora's laugh was bitter. She called me a gold digger, said I probably got pregnant on purpose, that I was trying to trap her son into a life he didn't want. You're better off without them. I know that. Nora's hand moved over her belly again, protective. I know that logically, but it still hurts. It still makes me feel like I did something wrong just by existing. Caleb thought about his own shame, the kind that came from failing at marriage, from not being enough for the person who'd promised forever. Different circumstances. Same crushing weight. What are you having? He asked. Boy or girl? Nora blinked at the subject change. Girl. You pick a name? Eliza, after my grandmother. That's pretty. Thanks. She studied him. Why are you still here, Caleb? It was the same question he'd been asking himself for the last 15 minutes. Why hadn't he made an excuse and left? Why had he sat down, opened up, allowed this strange intimacy to develop with a woman he'd known for less than half an hour? Because Miles asked why you always run. Because you're tired of being afraid. Because sitting across from someone else's honesty makes it easier to find your own. Because, Caleb said slowly, I think we're both tired of being judged for circumstances we can't change. And maybe for 20 minutes, we can just be two people drinking coffee. Your coffee's cold, so get a new one. My treat. Nora hesitated, then nodded. Decaf latte. Vanilla. Caleb stood, relieved to have something practical to do. The line at the counter was 3 people deep, giving him time to breathe, to process what was happening. This wasn't a date. Not really. But it wasn't nothing either. He ordered decaf vanilla latte for her, hot black coffee for himself, and waited while the barista worked. Through the window, he could see Nora still sitting at their table, her profile outlined against the gray February light. She looked tired. Beautiful, yes, but mostly tired, the kind that sleep wouldn't fix. When he returned with the drinks, she accepted hers with a quiet thank you that felt heavier than the words. They sipped in silence for a moment. Then Nora said, "Your son, Miles, what's he like?" Caleb felt his chest warm the way it always did when someone asked about his kid. He's everything. Smart as hell, asks a million questions, loves dinosaurs, and refuses to eat anything green unless I tell him it's dragon food. Dragon food? Nora's smile was genuine now, reaching her eyes. Broccoli becomes dragon scales. Spinach becomes dragon wings. It's the only way I can get vegetables in him. That's brilliant. That's desperation, Caleb grinned. But it works. He's also the most empathetic kid I've ever met. He notices when people are sad, asks if they're okay. It terrifies me. Why? Because the world's going to hurt him, Caleb said quietly, and I can't stop it. I can teach him to be kind, to be brave, to stand up for himself, but I can't protect him from the fact that kindness gets punished sometimes, that brave people get scared, that standing up for yourself doesn't always work. Nora was watching him with something like understanding. You're a good dad. I'm trying to be. That's all anyone can do. They fell into conversation after that, easier now, less weighted. Nora talked about her students, the 4-year-olds who treated her classroom like a kingdom and her word like law. Caleb talked about his work, the satisfaction of designing structures that would outlast him. They discovered shared tastes, both loved true crime podcasts, both hated romantic comedies, both thought deep dish pizza was overrated but would defend Chicago-style hot dogs to the death. 45 minutes passed without Caleb noticing. Then the laughter from across the room started. At first it was subtle. 3 women in their 40s seated near the window, glancing over and whispering behind their hands. Caleb noticed but ignored it. Coffee shops were public spaces. People looked at each other. It meant nothing, but the whispers got louder. Can't believe. Probably doesn't even know who the father is. Desperate. Nora heard it too. Caleb watched her face change, the warmth draining, walls slamming back up. She set down her latte with careful precision, her movements suddenly brittle. I should go, she said quietly. Nora, no, it's fine. It was nice, but I don't need to subject you to this. Subject me to what? The stares, the judgment, the assumptions. Her voice was steady, but Caleb could hear the hurt underneath. You've been kind, but I'm not your problem to solve. She started to stand. I mean, setting yourself up like that. Bet she planned it. Poor guy looks trapped. Nora froze halfway out of her chair. Caleb felt something snap inside him. Not anger exactly, but something hotter and more focused. He'd spent years avoiding confrontation, years letting people say whatever they wanted because engaging meant risk. But sitting here, watching Nora absorb cruelty she didn't deserve, Caleb remembered what Miles had asked. Why do you always leave when people start arguing? Not this time. Caleb stood up. Nora's eyes went wide. What are you... Stay here, he said quietly. Then louder, to the room. Excuse me. The coffee shop didn't go silent, not yet, but conversations dipped. People looked up. The 3 women by the window stopped mid-whisper. Caleb walked directly to their table. Up close, he could see them clearly. Well-dressed, confident, the kind of women who'd never been told to mind their business in their lives. They looked at him with a mixture of surprise and annoyance, like he was a waiter interrupting their meal. Can I help you? The blonde one asked, her tone suggesting she very much wanted him to go away. Yeah, Caleb said. His voice didn't shake. He was as surprised as anyone. You can stop talking about the woman I'm with like she's not a human being. The blonde blinked. Excuse me? I heard what you said. Desperate. Planned it. Trapped. You want to say it to my face? We were having a private conversation. In a public space, loud enough for half the room to hear. Caleb felt his hands curl into fists, forced them to relax. You don't know her. You don't know her story. And you sure as hell don't know mine. We were just making assumptions, Caleb finished. Based on what? That she's pregnant? That we're having coffee? Let me guess. You think she's trapping me? Think she got pregnant on purpose to lock down some guy? Think she's just another single mother looking for a meal ticket? The women's faces had gone red. Around them, the entire coffee shop had gone quiet now, everyone watching. You don't understand, the brunette started. No, you don't understand, Caleb said, and his voice was cold. That woman is a preschool teacher who spends her days shaping the minds of kids who will grow up to be better people than you're being right now. She's brave enough to raise a child alone because the father abandoned her. She showed up to a blind date 7 months pregnant, knowing she'd be judged, and she did it anyway. And you? He looked at each of them in turn. You sit here in your comfortable lives and tear her down for what? Entertainment? Silence. Caleb could feel his heart hammering, adrenaline singing through his veins. He'd never done this before, never confronted strangers, never made a scene. It was terrifying. It was also the most honest he'd felt in years. If you have something to say about her, Caleb finished quietly, say it to me. Otherwise, drink your coffee and leave us alone. He turned and walked back to his table. Nora was staring at him like she'd never seen him before. The coffee shop stayed quiet for another beat, then conversation slowly resumed, awkward at first, then building back to normal. The 3 women gathered their things and left quickly, avoiding eye contact. Caleb sat down. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting hard. You didn't have to do that, Nora said softly. I know. They'll probably leave bad reviews, 'cause a scene. Let them. Caleb, I'm tired, Nora. He looked at her. I'm tired of watching people get hurt and doing nothing. I'm tired of being safe, and I'm really tired of cowards like me standing by while good people get torn apart. Nora's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Thank you. Don't thank me. I didn't do it for you. Then why? Because my son asked why I always run, and I want to be able to tell him I stopped. They sat together in the aftermath, neither quite sure what to say. The moment felt too big for words, too raw and real and complicated. Finally, Nora said, I need to go. I have lesson plans to finish. Okay. But She paused, then pulled out her phone. Can I have your number? Caleb blinked. Yeah, of course. They exchanged numbers with the awkwardness of teenagers, fingers fumbling over screens. When they were done, Nora stood, carefully this time, one hand supporting her belly. This wasn't what I expected, she said. Me neither. I'm glad I came anyway. Me too. She started to leave, then turned back. Caleb, that thing you said about Miles learning from you? Yeah? He's lucky to have you. Then she was gone, disappearing into the cold February evening, leaving Caleb alone with cold coffee and the strange, unsettling feeling that something fundamental had shifted. He sat there for another 10 minutes, processing what had happened. His phone buzzed, his mother asking how it went. He ignored it. He'd call her tomorrow and tell her the truth, that she'd ambushed him, that it had been uncomfortable, and that he was glad she did. When he finally left, the barista gave him a small nod. Approval, maybe, or just acknowledgement. Outside, the temperature had dropped. Caleb pulled his coat tighter and started the walk to his car, his breath fogging in the freezing air. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't his mother. Nora, I meant what I said. Thank you. Caleb smiled despite the cold. Caleb, you're welcome. And for what it's worth, Eliza's lucky too. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Nora, maybe we could do this again sometime. Coffee, I mean, not the public humiliation. Caleb, I'd like that. Nora, just to be clear, I'm not looking for someone to rescue me. Caleb, good. I'm not looking to rescue anyone. Just trying to figure out how to be a better version of myself. Nora, that might be the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me. Caleb, stick around. I'm full of uncomfortable truths. Nora, noted. Good night, Caleb. Caleb, good night, Nora. He drove home through quiet streets, the city settling into its nighttime rhythm. When he pulled into his driveway, his sister's car was in front of his house. She'd been watching Miles while he was out. Inside, his son was already in pajamas, building an elaborate dinosaur city out of blocks on the living room floor. "Daddy!" Miles launched himself at Caleb's legs. "Did you meet the lady?" "I did, buddy." "Was she nice?" "Yeah, she was really nice." "Are you going to marry her?" Caleb's sister laughed from the couch. "Miles, baby, that's not how it works." But Caleb knelt down to his son's level, looking into those wide, trusting eyes. "I don't know what's going to happen, Miles, but I can tell you this. I'm proud of myself for not running away when things got hard." Miles considered this seriously. "Like when the T-Rex comes." "Exactly like when the T-Rex comes." "You're very brave, Daddy." Caleb pulled his son into a hug, breathing in the scent of kid shampoo and innocence. "I'm trying to be." After his sister left and Miles was asleep, Caleb sat alone in his living room, the house quiet except for the hum of the heater. He thought about Nora, about the way she'd held herself together even when the world was trying to break her. He thought about the women in the coffee shop, about how easy it was to judge from a distance. Mostly, he thought about the moment he'd stood up and walked toward conflict instead of away from it. It hadn't fixed anything, hadn't made him suddenly brave or transformed his life. But it had been a start. His phone buzzed one more time. "Nora. I'm not usually up this late, but I can't stop thinking about what you did today. Nobody's ever stood up for me like that. Not my friends, not my family, just you. A stranger who had every reason to walk away. I don't know what this is, friendship, maybe, or just two lonely people finding common ground. But whatever it is, I wanted you to know it mattered. You mattered. Thank you for being brave when I couldn't be." Caleb read the message 3 times, then typed his response carefully. "Caleb, you were brave just by showing up. Everything after that was just me trying to catch up." He set his phone down and looked at the dinosaur city Miles had abandoned on the floor, a chaotic, beautiful mess of blocks and imagination. Tomorrow, they'd have breakfast together. Tomorrow, Miles would ask 1,000 questions. Tomorrow, Caleb would go to work and come home and do the whole thing again. But tomorrow, when his son asked about the night, Caleb would have an answer. He'd stood his ground. He'd chosen honesty over safety. He'd met someone who understood what it meant to carry weight the world didn't want to see. And for the first time in years, Caleb's heart felt like maybe, just maybe, he was becoming someone worth knowing. The text message arrived at 6:30 the next morning, pulling Caleb from restless sleep. "Nora, is it too early to admit I've been awake since 4 thinking about yesterday?" Caleb blinked at his phone screen, then glanced at Miles's door, still closed, his son miraculously sleeping past dawn for once. He typed back quickly. "Caleb, only if it's too early to admit I didn't sleep much either." Nora, "Regrets?" Caleb, "The opposite. You?" Nora, "Terrified, but in a good way, I think." Caleb, "That makes 2 of us." He stared at the conversation for a long moment, trying to figure out what happened next. In the movies, this part was simple. Attraction led to another date, which led to a relationship, which led to some version of happily ever after. But real life was messier. Nora was 7 months pregnant with another man's child. Caleb was a divorced single father still learning how to be present in his own life. Neither of them was equipped for romance. But maybe that was the point. Before he could overthink it further, Miles's door banged open and small footsteps thundered down the hallway. "Daddy, I had a dream about pterodactyls." Caleb smiled despite his exhaustion. "Yeah? Were they scary?" "No, they were nice. They gave me rides." Miles climbed into bed beside him, all warm pajamas and bedhead. "Can we have pancakes?" "Dragon scales first." Miles wrinkled his nose. "Eggs aren't dragon scales." "Fine, dinosaur eggs. But you have to eat them." "Deal." They made breakfast together, Miles standing on a step stool at the counter, Caleb supervising as his son cracked eggs with intense concentration. It was their routine, the rhythm they'd built over 2 years of single parenting. Simple, comfortable, safe. Caleb's phone buzzed on the counter. Miles saw it first. "Is that Mommy?" "Nobody, just a friend." "What friend?" "Someone I met yesterday. Her name's Nora." Miles considered this with the seriousness of a 5-year-old processing new information. "She your girlfriend?" "No, we just had coffee." "But you like her." It wasn't a question. Kids had radar for things adults tried to hide. I think she's nice, Caleb said carefully. We're getting to know each other. Does she like dinosaurs? I don't know. Should I ask? Miles nodded enthusiastically. It's important. So while Miles ate his scrambled eggs, dubbed dinosaur eggs and therefore acceptable, Caleb sent another text. Caleb, my son wants to know if you like dinosaurs. Apparently it's a deal breaker. Nora, tell him I'm more of a marine biology person, but I deeply respect anyone committed to the Mesozoic era. Caleb, he says that's acceptable. Barely. Nora, I'm honored to pass the 5-year-old vetting process. They texted throughout the day in fragments, Caleb between meetings at work, Nora between lesson plans. Nothing deep, just the small talk of people learning each other's rhythms. She sent him a photo of a student's painting labeled My Teacher, a round purple blob with stick legs and an enormous smile. He sent her a photo of the bridge design he was reviewing, joking that it looked less impressive than the block towers Miles built. It felt normal, easy, like maybe they could actually be friends. Then Thursday came, and with it, reality. Caleb was at his desk reviewing structural calculations when his phone rang. Not a text, an actual call. From Nora. His stomach dropped. People their age didn't call unless something was wrong. Nora, you okay? Her voice was tight. I'm fine, the baby's fine, but A shaky breath. Can you talk? Just for a minute? Yeah, of course. What happened? I ran into David's mother. Caleb felt his jaw clench. Where? Grocery store. I was picking up groceries after work and she was just there. In the produce section. Nora laughed, but it sounded broken. She looked at my stomach and said congratulations like it was an insult. Asked if I'd found someone stupid enough to play daddy yet. Jesus Christ. I walked away. I didn't engage. I just left my cart and walked out. But now I'm sitting in my car and I can't stop shaking and I don't know why I called you except, her voice cracked, except you're the only person who's seen me fall apart and didn't run. Caleb looked at his computer screen, at the deadlines and meetings and responsibilities that suddenly felt insignificant. Where are you? The Jewel on Ashland. Stay there. I'm coming. You don't have to. I know. Stay there anyway. He told his boss he had a family emergency, grabbed his coat, and drove across the city in 20 minutes that felt like hours. When he pulled into the grocery store parking lot, he found Nora exactly where she said she'd be, sitting in a 10-year-old Honda Civic, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. Caleb tapped on her window. She looked up, startled, then unlocked the door. He slid into the passenger seat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nora said, I thought I was past this, past letting her get to me. You are allowed to be hurt by cruelty. Being strong doesn't mean being immune. I wanted to scream at her, tell her that her son is a coward who abandoned his own child, that she raised someone who thinks money solves accountability. I wanted to... She pressed her palms against her eyes. I wanted to make her feel as small as she makes me feel. But you didn't. No, I walked away, like I always do. Caleb thought about what he'd told Miles, about running from conflict, about choosing safety over honesty. He understood that instinct. He'd lived it for years. Walking away isn't weakness, he said quietly. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. Nora lowered her hands. Her eyes were red but dry. You don't believe that. I'm trying to. You stood up to those women at the coffee shop. You didn't walk away then. That was different. How? Because... Caleb stopped, searching for the right words. Because you deserved someone to fight for you, even if that someone was a stranger who barely knew you. Nora stared at him. And I don't deserve to fight for myself? The question landed like a punch. That's not what I meant, Caleb said. Isn't it? You came here to rescue me. Again. Like I'm some damsel who can't handle her own life. I came here because you called me scared and I wanted to help. I didn't ask you to help. I asked you to listen. The distinction hit him harder than it should have. Caleb felt his face flush. You're right. I'm sorry. When someone I care about is hurting, my instinct is to fix it. I'm not broken, Caleb. I know that. Do you? Nora's voice was sharp now, frustration cutting through the vulnerability. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you see a pregnant woman having a hard time and you want to be the hero who saves her, just like every other man who's tried to date me since I started showing. That's not fair, isn't it? You barely know me. We've had one coffee date and exchanged some texts, but you dropped everything and drove across the city because I was upset. That's not friendship, Caleb. That's you trying to prove something to yourself. The words stung because they were partially true. Caleb had been trying to prove something to Miles, to himself, to the universe, that he could show up, that he could be brave. But maybe bravery wasn't rushing in to fix things. Maybe it was knowing when to step back. You're right, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed you needed rescuing. Nora's anger deflated slightly. I didn't mean to snap at you. Yes, you did, and you should have. I overstepped. They sat in uncomfortable silence, the kind that follows harsh truths. Outside, shoppers pushed carts through the parking lot, their lives uncomplicated by the messy conversation unfolding in a stranger's car. Finally, Nora said, I called you because I wanted to talk to someone who wouldn't judge me, who wouldn't tell me to be the bigger person or remind me that stress is bad for the baby. I just wanted someone to say, that sucks, and mean it. That sucks, Caleb said, and his mother is a terrible person for saying those things to you. Thank you. You want me to go back in there and tell her off? Nora laughed, surprised and genuine. No, but I appreciate the offer. The offer stands. I'm getting pretty good at public confrontations. One coffee shop incident doesn't make you a vigilante. Give me time. She smiled and the tension in the car eased. I really am sorry for what I said, about you trying to be a hero. That wasn't fair either. It was a little fair, maybe, but you're not like the others. You actually listen when I talk. You don't treat me like I'm fragile. You're the least fragile person I've ever met. I'm sitting in a parking lot crying over a comment from my ex's mother. You're sitting in a parking lot processing legitimate hurt. That's different. Nora studied him for a long moment. Why are you really here, Caleb? It was the same question she'd asked at the coffee shop, but it felt heavier now, more honest. Because when you called, I heard your voice and I knew you were hurting, and I wanted... He paused, trying to find the right words. I wanted to be the kind of person who shows up for people. Not because I think you need saving, because I think you deserve to know someone cares. That's different from rescuing me. Yeah, it is. She reached over and squeezed his hand, brief but warm. Thank you for coming, even if I was a jerk about it. You weren't a jerk. You were honest. I needed that. Still friends? Still friends. Nora released his hand and took a deep breath. Okay, I'm going back in there. You sure? I need groceries. I'm not letting that woman chase me out of my own neighborhood. She opened the car door, then looked back. You want to come? I could use the backup. Moral support, not a rescue mission. Caleb grinned. I can do moral support. They walked into the grocery store together, Nora pushing a cart, Caleb walking beside her with his hands in his pockets. David's mother was long gone, but Nora moved through the aisles with determined focus, like reclaiming territory. What are we shopping for? Caleb asked. Meal prep. I cook on Thursdays for the week ahead, easier than trying to make dinner every night after work. What's on the menu? Chicken stir-fry, vegetable soup, and pasta with marinara. Nothing fancy, but it's what I can afford. They picked through produce together, Nora explaining which vegetables held up best in the fridge, Caleb offering commentary that was more entertaining than useful. When they passed the cereal aisle, Nora grabbed a box of something colorful and clearly marketed to children. Guilty pleasure, she admitted. The 4-year-olds got me hooked. Miles eats cereal that turns the milk blue. No judgment here. By the time they reached checkout, the earlier tension had evaporated completely. They loaded groceries onto the conveyor belt while the cashier, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled at them. When are you due, honey? She asked Nora. April, 8 weeks to go. Your husband helping out? There was a beat of awkward silence. Caleb felt Nora tense beside him, saw her mouth open to explain, to correct the assumption. But before she could speak, Caleb said casually, Trying my best, She won't let me carry anything heavy, though. The cashier laughed. Smart woman. They never listen otherwise. Nora shot him a look. Surprise mixed with something softer. Gratitude, maybe. Or relief at not having to explain her situation to a stranger. They finished checkout and walked to Nora's car, in silence. When they reached it, she turned to him. You didn't have to do that. I know. But watching you explain your life to every nosy stranger gets old. Sometimes it's easier to let them assume. It was kind. Thank you. You're welcome. Nora loaded her groceries into the trunk, Caleb helping despite her protests. When everything was packed away, she leaned against her car, exhaustion finally catching up. I'm tired, Caleb, not just physically. I'm tired of defending my choices, tired of being judged, tired of feeling like I have to earn the right to exist in public spaces. You shouldn't have to feel that way. But I do. And I will for the rest of my life because I'm going to be a single mother. Every birthday party, every school event, every doctor's appointment, people will look at me and make assumptions. Then they're idiots. That doesn't make it hurt less. Caleb wanted to argue, to insist that things would get better, that people would see her strength instead of her circumstances. But empty optimism felt like an insult to her intelligence. No, he said quietly. It doesn't. And I'm sorry. They stood together in the cold parking lot, breath fogging in the February air. Caleb checked his phone, 45 minutes since he'd left work. He should get back, finish the day, pick up Miles from aftercare, but leaving felt wrong. You want to get coffee? He asked. Actual coffee, not a crisis intervention disguised as friendship. Nora smiled. I can't. I have a doctor's appointment in an hour. Routine checkup. Everything okay? Yeah, just monitoring the baby's position. She's stubborn, won't flip head down yet. Takes after her mom. Definitely. Nora hesitated, then said, You could come, if you want. I know that's weird, and we barely know each other, but I'd like that, Caleb interrupted. If you're sure. I'm sure. I'm so tired of going alone. They drove separately to the clinic, a small practice tucked into a converted brownstone on the north side. The waiting room was painted in soothing blues and greens, filled with pregnant women at various stages and their partners. Caleb felt out of place immediately, like he was intruding on something intimate, but Nora grabbed his hand when they sat down, and the gesture steadied him. Nervous? She asked. Little bit. This is new territory. For me, too. I've never brought anyone to an appointment. Not even... No. He came to the first one, found out it was real, said he needed time to think, and that was it. Caleb squeezed her hand. His loss. You keep saying that. Because it's true. They sat quietly, surrounded by the sounds of the clinic, nurses calling names, babies crying from the pediatric side, the low murmur of nervous conversations. Caleb watched the other couples, noticed the way partners rubbed backs and whispered reassurances, and felt the weight of what Nora had been facing alone. Nora Lane? A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Nora stood, pulling Caleb with her. They followed the nurse down a hallway decorated with development posters. What to expect each trimester, common symptoms, warning signs. The nurse led them to an exam room and instructed Nora to change into a gown. You can stay, she told Caleb, assuming he belonged there. He looked at Nora, giving her the option to send him out. She shook her head. It's fine. Just turn around for a minute? He did, facing the wall while she changed. When she was ready, he helped her onto the exam table, the paper crinkling beneath her. The doctor arrived moments later, a woman in her 50s with efficient kindness. She greeted Nora warmly, then noticed Caleb. And you are? Caleb, friend. The doctor smiled. Good to meet you, Caleb. I'm Dr. Martinez. She washed her hands, then got to business. How are you feeling, Nora? Any concerns? Tired, sore, the usual. Braxton Hicks contractions? A few, nothing regular. Good. Let's check your blood pressure first. Caleb watched as Dr. Martinez worked, professional, thorough, occasionally asking questions that Nora answered with practiced ease. This was routine for her now, the monthly check-ins that tracked her daughter's growth. When the doctor pulled out the ultrasound machine, Caleb felt his heart rate spike. Let's see how this little one is doing, Doctor, Martinez said, squeezing gel onto Nora's exposed belly. The screen flickered to life, and suddenly Caleb was looking at a baby. Not an abstract concept or a future possibility, but an actual tiny human, curled up, thumb near her mouth, heart beating in steady rhythm. There she is, Dr. Martinez said, smiling. Looks great. Strong heartbeat, good movement. And she's still breech, but we have time for her to turn. Nora stared at the screen, her expression soft. She's really in there. She's really in there. You want to know her stats? Please. She's measuring right on track, about 4 pounds, 12 ounces, which is perfect for 32 weeks. Caleb couldn't look away from the screen. He'd been through this with Rebecca when she was pregnant with Miles, but that felt like a lifetime ago. Watching Nora's face now, the love and fear and determination written there, he understood something fundamental. This wasn't theoretical for her. This was her daughter, her future, her entire world about to change. You're doing great, Nora, Dr. Martinez said, wiping the gel away. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Same time? Same time. After the doctor left, Nora dressed slowly. Caleb waited outside, giving her privacy, then walked her back to the lobby. That was... She paused, searching for words. Thank you for being there. Thank you for letting me. They stepped outside into the late afternoon cold. The sun was already setting, winter days too short. I should get home, Nora said. Lesson plans to finish. And I need to pick up Miles, but... Caleb hesitated. Would you want to meet him? Sometime? No pressure. Just if you're interested. Nora's eyes widened. You want me to meet your son? Only if you want to. Miles has been asking about you. Well, asking if you like dinosaurs, but still. She laughed. I would love to meet him. Yeah? Yeah, just maybe somewhere low-key. I don't want to confuse him about what we are. We could go to the Field Museum, Sunday afternoon. Miles loves the dinosaur exhibits, and it's public enough that there's no weird pressure. That sounds perfect. They made plans quickly. Meeting time, which entrance, how long to stay. Then Nora drove away, and Caleb stood alone in the clinic parking lot, processing what had just happened. He'd gone to a prenatal appointment with a woman he'd known for less than a week. He'd seen her daughter on an ultrasound screen. He'd invited her to meet his son. None of this was logical. None of this followed the rules of normal dating or friendship building. But standing there in the cold, watching the sky turn dark, Caleb didn't feel scared. He felt something else entirely. He felt ready. Sunday arrived with clear skies and temperatures just above freezing. Caleb woke early, nerves making sleep impossible. Miles sensed something was different and bounced around the apartment asking 1,000 questions. Is Nora nice? Does she really like fish better than dinosaurs? Can I show her my T-Rex? What if she doesn't like me? She'll love you, Caleb assured him. Just be yourself. They met at the Field Museum at noon, Nora waiting near the main entrance, bundled in a thick coat that didn't quite hide her belly. When Miles saw her, he grabbed Caleb's hand tighter. She's pretty, he whispered. Yeah, she is. Remember your manners. Miles nodded seriously. Nora smiled when they approached. You must be Miles. I'm 5, Miles announced, and I know everything about dinosaurs. Everything? Almost everything. Daddy says nobody knows everything. Your daddy sounds smart. Miles beamed. Just like that, the ice was broken. They spent 3 hours wandering exhibits, Miles dragging them from display to display, explaining facts with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every label. Nora listened intently, asking questions that made Miles feel important. Caleb hung back slightly, watching them interact, feeling something warm and terrifying settle in his chest. This felt like family, not romance, not obligation, just 3 people who fit together naturally, like puzzle pieces discovering they belonged. When they reached the marine biology section, Nora came alive. She showed Miles the giant squid, explained bioluminescence, pointed out her favorite species with the same enthusiasm he'd shown for dinosaurs. The ocean is like space, she told him. We've explored more of space than we have of our own oceans. That's scary, Miles said. Or exciting. Think about all the things we haven't discovered yet. Miles considered this. Do you think there are still dinosaurs down there? Like deep, deep down where nobody looks? Maybe. The ocean's full of surprises. Daddy, Can we get a submarine? Caleb laughed. Sure, buddy. Right after we get a spaceship. They ended the afternoon in the museum cafe, Miles coloring on a placemat while Caleb and Nora talked quietly. He's wonderful, Nora said. You've done an amazing job with him. Most days I feel like I'm faking it. That's parenthood. Nobody actually knows what they're doing. We're all just hoping we don't screw them up too badly. Comforting. Honest. She watched Miles color, then said softly, I'm terrified I'm going to do it alone. You won't. You don't know that. I know you've already proven you're stronger than most people. And I know... He stopped, searching for the right words. I know you're not alone right now, even if we're just friends. You've got people. Nora's eyes went bright. Thank you. Miles looked up from his drawing. Nora, do you want to be our friend? She smiled. I would love that. Good. Because you're nice and Daddy smiles more when you're around. Caleb felt his face heat. Miles, it's true, you do. Miles returned to his coloring, oblivious to the emotional grenade he'd just lobbed. Nora was trying not to laugh. Out of the mouths of babes. He's very observant. Clearly. They left the museum as the sun began to set, Miles chattering about everything he'd learned. In the parking lot, before they separated, Nora hugged Miles. Thank you for showing me the dinosaurs, she said. You're welcome. Thank you for showing me the fish. Deal. Then, more hesitantly, she hugged Caleb. It was brief, just a moment of warmth, but it felt like a promise. Same time next week? She asked. Same time next week. They drove home in comfortable silence, Miles falling asleep in the back seat. When Caleb carried him inside, his phone buzzed. Nora, your son is magic. Thank you for sharing him with me. Caleb, thank you for making him laugh. He hasn't stopped talking about bioluminescence. Nora, good. The world needs more kids who love science. Caleb, and fewer kids who think fish are boring. Nora, you're never going to let that go, are you? Caleb, never. He put Miles to bed, read him 2 stories, then sat alone in his living room feeling something shift. This thing with Nora, whatever it was, had stopped being theoretical. It was real now, messy and complicated and absolutely terrifying. But for the first time since his divorce, Caleb wasn't running from complicated. He was walking straight toward it, eyes open, heart ready. And that made all the difference. 3 weeks passed in a blur of museum visits, coffee shop meetings, and text messages that stretched late into the night. Caleb found himself thinking about Nora at odd moments, during engineering meetings, while helping Miles with homework, in the quiet spaces between sleep and waking. She'd become woven into the fabric of his daily life so seamlessly he couldn't remember what things had been like before. Then March arrived with unseasonable warmth and everything changed. Caleb was at work when his phone rang. Nora's name flashed on the screen and he answered immediately, already moving toward the hallway for privacy. Hey, everything okay? I need a favor. Her voice was tight, controlled in the way that meant she was barely holding it together. And you can say no. I'll understand if you say no. What do you need? My landlord is selling the building. I have to be out by the end of the month. I've been apartment hunting for 2 weeks, and everything I can afford is either too far from work or in neighborhoods that aren't safe for a baby. I'm running out of options, and She took a shaky breath. I need help moving my furniture into storage this weekend, just until I figure things out. Caleb didn't hesitate. I'll be there. What time? Caleb, I haven't told you when yet. Doesn't matter. I'll be there. Silence stretched between them. Then Nora said quietly, Saturday morning, 9 o'clock? I'll bring Miles. He's surprisingly good at organizing boxes. You don't have to bring him. This isn't his problem. He'd be upset if I didn't. He asks about you every day. Is Nora coming over? Can we go see the fish again? Does baby Eliza like dinosaurs yet? That got a laugh out of her. Small and watery, but genuine. Tell him Eliza definitely likes dinosaurs. I can feel her doing somersaults every time we talk about them. See? She's got good taste already. They talked for another 10 minutes. Logistics, what storage unit she'd rented, what furniture needed to go. When they hung up, Caleb sat in the stairwell outside his office and let himself feel the full weight of what was happening. Nora was being forced out of her home 5 weeks before giving birth. She was searching for apartments while teaching full-time, preparing for a baby alone, and still managing to show up for every museum trip with Miles like her world wasn't falling apart. He texted his sister, Caleb, "Can you watch Miles this Saturday? I need to help a friend move." Sarah, "The pregnant teacher?" Caleb, "Her name is Nora." Sarah, "Mom's been talking. She says you're smitten." Caleb, "I'm helping a friend, that's all." Sarah, "Sure, I'll take Miles, but you owe me details." Caleb, "There are no details." Sarah, "We'll see." Saturday morning arrived cold and gray, the brief warmth of early March giving way to winter's last stand. Caleb picked up Miles at 7, stopped for coffee and donuts, then drove to Nora's apartment building on the west side. She lived on the 3rd floor of a walk-up, no elevator, narrow stairs, exactly the kind of place a heavily pregnant woman shouldn't be navigating alone. When she answered the door, Caleb's chest tightened. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that came from weeks of stress and interrupted sleep. But she smiled when she saw Miles. "Hey, dinosaur expert, ready to help?" Miles nodded seriously. "Daddy says I'm in charge of labeling boxes." "That's a very important job. Think you can handle it?" "Yes, ma'am." Nora's apartment was small but warm. 1 bedroom, a living space barely big enough for a couch and bookshelf, a kitchen the size of a closet. But she'd made it home. Plants lined the windowsill. Children's drawings covered the fridge. Books were stacked everywhere, spines broken from repeated reading. "I know it's not much," she said, catching Caleb's expression. "It's perfect. Shows who you are." "A broke teacher with too many books?" "Someone who makes a home wherever she goes." Nora looked away quickly, but not before Caleb saw her eyes go bright. "I packed most of the small stuff already. The furniture is what I need help with." They worked steadily for 3 hours. Caleb disassembled her bed frame and dresser while Miles labeled boxes with careful block letters. Nora directed traffic, trying to help until Caleb physically steered her toward the couch. "You're 8 months pregnant. Sit." "I can still lift things." "Not while I'm here, you can't." "That's sexist." "That's practical. Doctor's orders, right? No heavy lifting?" She scowled but didn't argue, which told Caleb she was more exhausted than she wanted to admit. Miles brought her water and kept up a steady stream of chatter, explaining his labeling system with the seriousness of an accountant. "This box is books. This one is kitchen. This one is Nora's clothes. This one is—" He stopped, staring at a box he'd just opened. "What's all this baby stuff?" Nora went very still. Inside the box were tiny clothes, onesies and sleepers, soft blankets, a stuffed elephant still wrapped in plastic. Everything was organized with the same care Nora brought to her classroom, but there was something heartbreaking about seeing it all packed away. "That's for Eliza," Nora said quietly. "When she's born." "Can I see?" Nora nodded, and Miles carefully pulled out a yellow sleeper with ducks on it. "She's going to be so small." "Smaller than you were. About 7 pounds if she's average." "That's tiny." Miles held the sleeper up, marveling. "Did I look like this?" Caleb felt something catch in his throat. "Yeah, buddy, you were this small once." "Was I cute?" "The cutest." Miles carefully folded the sleeper and put it back in the box, then turned to Nora with complete sincerity. "Eliza's lucky to have you as her mom." Nora's composure cracked. Tears spilled over before she could stop them, and she covered her face with her hands. Miles looked panicked. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, sweetheart." Nora's voice was muffled. "You said something very, very right." Caleb knelt beside her. "Hey, you okay?" "I'm terrified," she whispered. "I'm going to be homeless in 3 weeks with a newborn. I don't have family here. David's parents want nothing to do with us. And I'm sitting here realizing I might have to move back to Indiana with my parents, who told me I was making a mistake keeping this baby." "You're not going back to Indiana. I might not have a choice." "There's always a choice. Not when you're broke and pregnant and running out of time." Caleb looked at Miles, who was watching with worried eyes. He made a decision that was probably stupid, definitely impulsive, and absolutely necessary. "Move in with us." Nora's head snapped up. "What?" "Move in with us. Temporarily. Just until you find a place. I have a 2-bedroom apartment, Miles and I share the master. The second bedroom is basically storage. You could stay there. Caleb, I can't. Why not? Because it's insane. Because we've known each other for a month. Because you have a son to think about. Because you're too proud to accept help? The words came out sharper than he intended. Nora flinched. Caleb softened his voice. I'm not offering because I pity you. I'm offering because you need a place to stay and I have one. It's practical. Nothing about this is practical. Maybe not, but it's right. Nora stared at him, searching for the angle, the hidden agenda. Caleb held her gaze, letting her see the truth. He wasn't asking for anything. He was just offering what he had. What about Miles? She asked finally. What about him? Won't it confuse him, having me living there? Caleb glanced at his son, who was listening intently. Miles? How would you feel if Nora stayed with us for a while? Miles's face lit up. Like a sleepover? Kind of. She needs a place to stay until she finds a new apartment. Can we still go to museums? Of course. And will she tell me about fish? Nora laughed despite herself. As much as you want. Then she should definitely stay. Miles returned to his labeling with the matter settled in his mind. Nora looked back at Caleb. You're serious about this? Completely. I'd pay rent and utilities. I'm not a freeloader. We'll figure out the details. But right now, say yes. She studied him for a long moment, and Caleb could see the war happening behind her eyes. Pride versus desperation, independence versus reality, fear versus trust. Finally, she nodded. Okay, yes, but only until I find something else. Deal. They shook on it, formal and slightly ridiculous, and Miles cheered like his team had won the Super Bowl. The rest of the move went faster with the new plan. Instead of hauling everything to storage, they loaded Nora's essentials into Caleb's truck. Her furniture would go to the unit, but her clothes, books, and baby supplies came with them. By mid-afternoon, they were hauling boxes up to Caleb's second-floor apartment in Lincoln Park. The spare bedroom was exactly as he'd described, full of Miles's outgrown toys, Caleb's camping equipment, and the general detritus of single-parent life. They spent an hour clearing it out, Miles helping by showing Nora every toy and explaining its significance. This is my old baseball glove, and this is the rocket I built with Daddy, and this is... Oh, this is Mr. Whiskers. He held up a battered stuffed cat. I thought he was lost. Guess he was waiting for the right time to come back, Nora said. By the time they finished, the room looked almost livable. Caleb brought in an air mattress, temporary until they could get her a real bed, and Nora hung a few of her things in the closet. It wasn't much, but it was hers. I can't believe I'm doing this, she said, standing in the doorway. Having second thoughts? More like fourth or fifth thoughts. But I'm too tired to move again today, so I guess I'm committed. They ordered pizza for dinner, Miles insisting on pepperoni, Nora requesting vegetables, Caleb getting both and mediating the great pineapple debate that followed. Eating together in Caleb's small living room felt surreal and normal at the same time, like they'd fast-forwarded through months of gradual adjustment straight into domestic life. After Miles went to bed, Caleb and Nora sat on the couch with mugs of tea, the apartment quiet except for the radiator's rhythmic clanking. Thank you, Nora said quietly. I know I said it already, but I need you to understand. What you're doing, it's more than I deserve. Stop saying that. You deserve stability, safety, a place to prepare for your daughter. I barely know you. You know me better than most people. That's not saying much. We've had, 10 conversations? A few museum trips? Some texts? Quality over quantity. Nora shook her head, but she was smiling. You're impossible. I've been told. They sat in comfortable silence, both processing the enormity of what had just happened. Caleb had essentially invited a pregnant woman he'd known for a month to move into his home with his 5-year-old son. If he told anyone, his mother, his sister, his friends, they'd think he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But sitting here with Nora, watching her finally relax into the couch cushions, Caleb couldn't bring himself to regret it. What happens when Eliza comes? Nora asked suddenly. What do you mean? I mean she's going to cry at night. A lot. She's going to disrupt your sleep, Miles's routine, your whole life. Are you prepared for that? Miles was colicky. I survived 3 months of screaming. I can handle it. This isn't your baby, Caleb. I know that. Then why are you doing this? It was the same question in different words. Why had he sat down at the coffee shop? Why had he stood up to those women? Why had he driven across the city when she called upset? Why had he invited her to meet Miles, to his son's world, and now into his home? Because I spent 3 years being the kind of person who walked away when things got hard, Caleb said. And I'm tired of being that person. You needed help. I could give it. Everything else is just noise. That's not noise. That's legitimate concern about boundaries and expectations. Fine. You want boundaries? Here they are. You're a guest, not a project. You don't owe me anything except honesty. If this gets weird or uncomfortable, we talk about it. And when you find a place, you go. No guilt, no obligation. Deal? Nora studied him. You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. Or maybe you're naive. Also possible. She laughed, tired and genuine, and Caleb felt the last of the day's tension drain away. That night, lying in bed while Miles snored softly beside him, Caleb stared at the ceiling and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. Nora was down the hall in a room that still smelled like storage and old toys, probably just as awake, probably just as uncertain. His phone buzzed. Nora. I can hear you thinking through the walls. Caleb. Thin walls. Sorry. Nora. I'm thinking too. This is insane, right? Caleb. Completely. Nora. But good insane? Caleb. The best kind. Nora. Thank you for everything. I mean it. Caleb. Get some sleep. Tomorrow Miles is going to give you the full apartment tour, including his extensive dinosaur collection. Nora. Can't wait. Caleb. Liar. Nora. Good night, Caleb. Caleb. Good night, Nora. He set his phone down and closed his eyes, listening to the apartment settle around him. Somewhere down the hall, Nora was doing the same. And somehow, despite the insanity of it all, Caleb fell asleep easier than he had in months. The first week of cohabitation was an exercise in awkward adjustment. Nora tried to make herself invisible, waking early to shower before anyone else was up, keeping her things contained to her room, offering to cook dinner every night like rent paid in labor. Caleb kept trying to convince her to relax, that she didn't need to earn her place. Miles thought having Nora around was the best thing that had ever happened, and attached himself to her like a barnacle. Nora, want to see my drawings? Nora, can you read this book? Nora, do fish sleep? Nora, why is the sky blue? She answered every question with the patience of someone who spent her days with 4-year-olds, but Caleb could see exhaustion creeping in around the edges. Thursday evening, he found her in the kitchen after putting Miles to bed, staring at apartment listings on her laptop with the kind of desperation that made his chest ache. Any luck? He asked. Define luck. I found 3 places in my budget. One's an hour from my school, one's in a neighborhood where someone got shot last week, and one doesn't allow children under 10. They can't discriminate like that. They can if they call it a quiet adult building. Nora closed her laptop with more force than necessary. I'm running out of time, Caleb. I'm due in 4 weeks. I can't bring a newborn into an unstable situation. You're not in an unstable situation, you're here. I can't stay here forever. Why not? The question hung in the air between them. Nora stared at him. Because that's not the deal. I'm supposed to find a place and go. That's what we agreed. We agreed you'd stay until you found something that worked. What if nothing works? Something will work. It has to. But Caleb could hear the doubt in her voice. He sat down across from her, choosing his words carefully. What if you stayed? Not temporarily, actually stayed. Caleb, hear me out. You need a stable place. Miles loves having you here. And honestly, having another adult around has made everything easier. We're already splitting groceries and cooking. The apartment feels less empty. It works. That's not how this is supposed to go. You're supposed to be dating someone, falling in love, building toward something, not taking in strays out of pity. You're not a stray, and this isn't pity. Then what is it? Caleb didn't have a good answer. What was it? Friendship? Probably. Something more? Maybe. He'd stopped trying to categorize what Nora meant to him. She was just important. Essential, even. The idea of her leaving, of going back to being alone in some apartment across the city, felt wrong. It's 2 people figuring things out together, he said finally. That's all. No expectations, no pressure, just partnership. Partnership. Yeah, you help with Miles sometimes. I help with Eliza when she comes. We split bills and grocery shopping and the mental load of running a household. It's practical. You keep saying that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Maybe not, but it's true anyway. Nora shook her head, but she wasn't saying no. Caleb could see her turning it over, examining it from every angle, looking for the trap. What about when you want to date someone? She asked. What about when you do? I'm about to have a newborn. Dating is the last thing on my mind. Same, so we're both out of the running for a while. Might as well be out of the running together. She laughed despite herself. This is the weirdest arrangement I've ever heard of. Welcome to my life. Everything's weird. I need to think about it. Take your time. But Nora? He waited until she met his eyes. You're not a burden. You're not an obligation. You're someone I want in my life, in whatever capacity that looks like. Her eyes went bright again, and Caleb was starting to recognize that as her tell, the moment when his words hit somewhere tender. Okay, she said quietly. I'll think about it. 2 days later, Nora went into labor. It started with a phone call at 3 a.m. Caleb jolted awake, heart pounding, and grabbed his phone from the nightstand. Caleb? Nora's voice was tight with pain. I think it's time. He was out of bed before she finished the sentence. How far apart are the contractions? 5 minutes. They started an hour ago. I didn't want to wake you, but I'm glad you did. I'm coming. He threw on clothes, woke Miles gently, and called his sister. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later, bleary-eyed but alert, and took over Miles' duty without question. By the time Caleb got to Nora's room, she was dressed and gripping the doorframe through another contraction. We need to go, she gasped when it passed. Hospital bag? By the door. He grabbed it and helped her down the stairs, moving slowly, stopping when contractions hit. The drive to Northwestern Memorial took 15 minutes that felt like hours. Nora breathed through each contraction with the kind of focus that came from childbirth classes and sheer determination. You're doing great, Caleb said, probably for the 10th time. I'm terrified. That's allowed. What if something goes wrong? Nothing's going to go wrong. You don't know that. No, but I know you're strong enough to handle whatever comes. They made it to the labor and delivery floor at 4:30. A nurse took Nora's information, got her into a room, checked her progress. You're at 6 centimeters, the nurse said cheerfully. Moving right along. First baby? Yes. You have a birth plan. Epidural. Definitely epidural. We'll get the anesthesiologist, and Dad can stay right here with you. Nora started to correct her, but another contraction hit and the moment passed. When it eased, she looked at Caleb. You don't have to stay. I know. This could take hours. I'm aware. Caleb, Nora, I'm staying. Stop trying to give me outs. She nodded, tears slipping free, and Caleb pulled a chair close to the bed and took her hand. The next 6 hours were a blur of contractions, ice chips, and Nora's hand crushing his with strength he didn't know she possessed. The epidural helped, but labor was still brutal. A marathon of pain and exhaustion and moments of sheer terror when the monitors beeped wrong. But through it all, Nora never broke. She breathed through each contraction, followed the nurse's instructions, and held on to Caleb's hand like it was the only solid thing in the world. At 10:47 in the morning, Eliza Lane entered the world screaming. The sound hit Caleb like a physical force, raw and powerful and absolutely perfect. The doctor placed her on Nora's chest, this tiny, furious creature covered in vernix, and Nora sobbed. She's here. She's really here. She's beautiful, Caleb said, and meant it. Eliza had dark hair like her mother, a furious red face, and the loudest cry he'd ever heard from something so small. Nora held her with shaking hands, counting fingers and toes, whispering promises Caleb couldn't hear. He stayed while they cleaned Eliza up, while the nurses did their checks, while Nora got stitched and settled into recovery. He stayed when visiting hours technically ended and the nurses looked the other way. He stayed because leaving felt impossible. Around midnight, with Nora finally sleeping and Eliza tucked into the bassinet beside her bed, Caleb let himself feel the full weight of what had just happened. He'd watched a woman he cared about give birth to a child that wasn't his. He'd held her hand through the worst pain of her life. He'd seen her daughter take her first breath, and he couldn't imagine having been anywhere else. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah with a photo of Miles asleep on her couch, still clutching Mr. Whiskers. Sarah: he's fine. How's Nora? Caleb: she's amazing. Baby's healthy. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Sarah: and you? Caleb: I think I just watched the bravest thing I've ever seen. Sarah: you love her. Caleb stared at the words. He should deny it. Should explain it was complicated. Should remind his sister this was just friendship, just two people helping each other. But sitting in a hospital room at midnight, watching Nora sleep with her daughter beside her, Caleb couldn't lie. Caleb: yeah, I think I do. Sarah: does she know? Caleb: no, and she can't, not yet, maybe not ever. Sarah: why not? Caleb: because she needs a friend right now, not someone with expectations. She needs stability without pressure, and I can give her that. Sarah: that's very noble and very stupid. Caleb: probably, but it's what she needs. He set his phone down and looked at Nora again. In sleep, the exhaustion smoothed from her face, she looked younger, vulnerable, like someone who just fought a war and won. Caleb made himself a promise in that quiet hospital room. He would be whatever Nora needed, friend, roommate, support system, or nothing at all. He would put his own feelings aside and show up for her the way no one else had. Because that's what love looked like when you actually meant it. Not possession, not expectation, just presence, constant, steady, and true. Nora woke to the sound of Eliza fussing and the surreal realization that she was a mother. The hospital room was dim, early morning light filtering through the blinds. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache, and exhaustion sat heavy on her chest like a physical weight. But when she turned her head and saw her daughter, red-faced and squirming in the bassinet, making those small, desperate sounds that preceded a full cry, something shifted inside her. "Hey, sweet girl," she whispered, reaching for Eliza with hands that still trembled. "I've got you." The baby latched immediately, hungry and determined, and Nora felt tears slip down her cheeks. Relief, terror, love so fierce it hurt. She'd spent 9 months preparing for this moment, and somehow it still felt completely impossible. A soft knock at the door pulled her attention. Caleb stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee and looking like he'd slept in a chair, which, Nora realized with a start, he probably had. "You stayed," she said. "Where else would I be?" He set 1 coffee on her bedside table. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck, a beautiful 7-pound truck that I love more than breathing." Caleb smiled and moved closer, looking at Eliza with the kind of gentle awe usually reserved for museum exhibits. "She's perfect. She's wrinkly and red. Perfect and wrinkly and red." Nora laughed despite the exhaustion. "You should go home. Get real sleep. Check on Miles." "Sarah sent me a photo an hour ago. He's fine. Built an entire Lego city and renamed it Elizaville in honor of his new friend. He hasn't even met her yet. Doesn't matter. He's already planning her 5th birthday party. Something about dinosaurs and fish fighting for supremacy." "That's very on brand." They fell into comfortable silence, watching Eliza nurse with the single-minded focus of the newly born. Caleb sipped his coffee. Nora tried to process the fact that this man, who'd walked into her life 5 weeks ago, had just spent 12 hours in a hospital because she'd needed someone, and he'd decided to be that person. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being here. For all of it. I couldn't have done this alone." "You could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to." A nurse bustled in before Nora could respond, all efficiency and cheerful instructions about postpartum care. She checked Nora's vitals, showed her how to swaddle Eliza properly, and reminded her about the lactation consultant who'd be by later. When she left, Nora felt the weight of reality settling in. She had a daughter, a tiny human who depended on her completely, and in 48 hours they'd be discharged from this cocoon of medical supervision into the real world. The real world where Nora had no family nearby, no partner, and a 2-bedroom apartment she was sharing with a man she was definitely, absolutely, catastrophically falling in love with. That last thought hit her like ice water. She looked at Caleb, at the way he held his coffee cup, the tired lines around his eyes, the gentleness in his expression as he watched Eliza. When had this happened? When had friendship turned into something deeper? Was it the coffee shop confrontation? The grocery store rescue? The museum trips where he'd let Miles monopolize her attention without jealousy? The moment he'd offered her a place to stay without expecting anything in return? Or had it been inevitable from the first moment he'd chosen to sit down instead of running? "You okay?" Caleb asked, noticing her stare. "Yeah, just tired." "You should sleep. I can hold her if you want." "You don't have to." "Nora." His voice was gentle but firm. "Let me help." So she did. She handed Eliza to Caleb, watched him accept her daughter with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before, and let herself sink back into the pillows. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Caleb holding Eliza against his chest, murmuring something soft that she couldn't quite hear. When she woke again, it was afternoon. Caleb was gone, but there was a note on the bedside table in his careful handwriting. "Went to get Miles and Sarah, back in an hour. You're doing amazing. See." Nora read it 3 times, then tucked it into her hospital bag like something precious. They came back as promised. Miles bursting through the door with barely contained excitement, Sarah following with a gift bag, and Caleb bringing up the rear looking more rested. "Can I see her? Can I hold her? Is she awake? Does she know about dinosaurs yet?" "Miles, slow down," Caleb said, but he was smiling. Nora laughed. "Come here, buddy. You can meet her." Miles approached the bassinet with reverent caution, like he was visiting royalty. Eliza was awake, staring at nothing with unfocused newborn eyes, and Miles gasped. "She's so tiny." "She'll get bigger. You were this small once." "That's what Daddy said, but I don't remember being tiny." "Nobody does." "Can I touch her?" "Gentle, just one finger." Miles reached out and carefully stroked Eliza's cheek. The baby turned toward the touch instinctively, mouth opening, and Miles jerked back. "Did I hurt her?" "No, sweetheart. She's just looking for food. That's called the rooting reflex." "What's a reflex?" "Something your body does automatically, like blinking when something comes near your face." Miles blinked experimentally. "Cool." Sarah stepped forward with the gift bag. "These are from me. Some practical things you'll need." Inside were diapers, wipes, a few sleepers in newborn size, and unexpectedly, a beautiful handmade blanket in soft yellow and gray. "Sarah, this is—" Nora's voice caught. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to. Every baby deserves to be welcomed properly." The kindness of it, the casual acceptance, the generosity without expectation, broke something in Nora. She started crying, hormones and exhaustion and gratitude all tangled together. Miles looked alarmed. "Why is Nora sad?" "She's not sad," Caleb said gently. "Sometimes people cry when they're happy." "That's weird." "Yeah, it is, but it's okay." Sarah gave Nora's hand a quick squeeze, then diplomatically suggested she and Miles go find the cafeteria and get snacks. When they were gone, Nora wiped her eyes and tried to pull herself together. "I'm a mess." "You just had a baby. You're allowed to be a mess. Your sister is wonderful. Your whole family is wonderful. How did I get this lucky?" "Luck had nothing to do with it. You showed up to a blind date 7 months pregnant and decided to be honest. Everything else followed from that." "Is that your philosophy? Honesty leads to good things." "Honesty leads to real things. Good or bad, at least they're true." Nora looked at him, really looked at him, and felt the truth of her own feelings settle in her chest like a weight. She was in love with Caleb Hart, completely, terrifyingly, inconveniently in love with him. And she couldn't tell him. Not now, maybe not ever. Because he'd offered her friendship and stability and a place in his life without conditions. Telling him how she felt would shift the dynamic, add pressure, potentially destroy the delicate balance they'd built. She couldn't risk that. Not when she was about to bring a newborn home to his apartment. Not when Miles had gotten attached. Not when everything was already so complicated. So she swallowed the words and said instead, "I've been thinking about what you said. About staying." Caleb went very still. "Yeah? If the offer's still open, I'd like to accept. Not forever, just until I figure out long-term plans. But it would help knowing I have stability for the first few months with Eliza." "The offer's open. For as long as you need. I'll pay rent, fair market rate for the room, half utilities and groceries, that's it." "Caleb, that's the deal. Take it or leave it." Nora wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. "Fine. But I'm cooking dinner at least 3 times a week. Deal. They shook on it again, and Nora tried to ignore the warmth that spread through her at his touch. The next 2 days in the hospital passed in a blur of feeding schedules, learning to change diapers, and the small terror of keeping a human alive. The lactation consultant was patient but demanding. The pediatrician declared Eliza perfectly healthy, and the postpartum nurse gave Nora a sobering lecture about warning signs that sent her anxiety through the roof. Caleb visited every day, usually with Miles in tow. He brought real food to supplement the hospital meals, sat with her through the lonely evening hours, and held Eliza when Nora needed to shower or sleep. He never made it feel like an obligation, never treated her like charity, just showed up, steady and constant, exactly when she needed him. On discharge day, Nora dressed Eliza in a soft pink sleeper and the yellow blanket Sarah had made, then stared at the car seat like it was a puzzle she'd never solve. "You're sure I'm doing this right?" she asked Caleb for the 3rd time. "The straps are tight, her head is supported. You're doing fine." "What if I'm not? What if I get home and realize I have no idea what I'm doing?" "Then you figure it out, same as every parent in history." "That's not comforting." "It's honest." They made it to the car without incident. Caleb drove with the exaggerated care of someone transporting explosives, and Nora sat in the back next to Eliza's car seat, watching her daughter sleep and feeling her heart race. This was real. This was happening. She was taking a baby home. When they pulled up to Caleb's apartment building, Sarah was waiting outside with Miles. She'd helped set up the spare bedroom while they were gone, assembled a borrowed bassinet, organized the baby supplies, made everything as ready as possible for a newborn's arrival. "Welcome home," she said when Nora climbed out of the car. "Home." The word settled over Nora like the blanket Sarah had made, warm and unexpected and absolutely terrifying. Inside, Miles wanted to help with everything. He carried the diaper bag like it contained state secrets. He showed Eliza his room, his toys, his favorite books. He asked 1,000 questions about why babies couldn't walk yet and whether Eliza would like dinosaurs when she got older. "She'll like whatever she likes," Nora told him. "We can't decide for her." "But she should like dinosaurs. They're the best." "Maybe. Or maybe she'll surprise us." That first night home was chaos. Eliza woke every 2 hours to feed, screaming with the indignation of the newly hungry. Nora stumbled through diaper changes and fumbled with nursing positions, while exhaustion turned her brain to fog. Around 3 in the morning, she was sitting in the rocking chair Sarah had brought over, trying to soothe a crying baby and fighting back tears of her own, when Caleb appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" "She won't stop crying. I fed her, changed her, burped her. I don't know what else to do."
Try see.
"Want me to try?" Nora wanted to say no, wanted to prove she could handle this alone, but pride felt like a luxury she couldn't afford at 3 in the morning. "Please." Caleb took Eliza gently, settling her against his shoulder and swaying in the small space. He hummed something soft, not quite a song, just sound, and walked slow circles around the room. Gradually, miraculously, Eliza's cries faded to hiccups and then to silence. "How did you do that?" Nora whispered. "Miles had colic. 3 months of this every night. You develop techniques." "I feel like I'm failing already." "You're not failing. You're learning. There's a difference." Eliza slept against his shoulder, peaceful and perfect, and Nora felt something crack open in her chest. This man was holding her daughter at 3 in the morning like it was the most natural thing in the world, like he belonged here, like this was his family too. "Go back to bed," Caleb said quietly. "I'll stay with her for a while." "You have work tomorrow." "I'll manage. Sleep, Nora." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist this was her responsibility. But exhaustion won, and she stumbled back to her room and collapsed into bed. When she woke 4 hours later, sunlight was streaming through the window and the apartment was quiet. She panicked immediately. Too quiet meant something was wrong, and rushed to the living room. Caleb was asleep on the couch with Eliza on his chest, one hand supporting her back, both of them breathing in gentle rhythm. Miles was curled up at the other end of the couch, also asleep, thumb in his mouth like he was 3 again. Nora stood frozen in the doorway, watching this accidental family she'd somehow stumbled into, and felt her heart break and heal at the same time. This was what she'd wanted her whole life. Not the fairy tale, not the perfect romance, Just this. People who showed up when things were hard, who held crying babies at 3 in the morning without resentment, who made space for her without expecting her to shrink. She took a picture with her phone, not to post, just to keep, then started coffee as quietly as possible. The first week home was survival. Nora learned Eliza's cries, hungry versus tired versus overstimulated. She figured out nursing positions that didn't make her shoulders ache. She discovered that newborns slept constantly, but never for more than 2 hours at a stretch. Caleb helped when he could, taking Eliza for walks around the apartment when she was fussy, doing midnight diaper changes without being asked, keeping Miles entertained so Nora could sleep. Sarah visited twice, bringing more supplies and calm competence. Nora's mother called from Indiana, awkward and stilted, and asked if she needed help. Nora said she was managing, then cried for an hour after hanging up because managing felt like the most generous interpretation possible. But slowly, impossibly, they found a rhythm. Caleb went back to work, but came home for lunch when he could. Miles started kindergarten and came back with stories about his new friends and drawings for Eliza's room. Nora navigated maternity leave and the strange limbo of being home all day with an infant. They split cooking duties, grocery shopping, the endless laundry that came with a newborn. It felt like playing house, like pretending it's something they couldn't actually have, except it didn't feel like pretending. 2 weeks after bringing Eliza home, Nora was folding tiny onesies at the kitchen table when Caleb came home from work looking stressed. "Everything okay?" she asked. "My mom wants to visit. Meet Eliza. I've been putting her off, but she's getting insistent." Nora's stomach dropped. "She knows I'm staying here? She knows you needed a place after being displaced. She doesn't know the full arrangement, which means she's going to show up, see me living with you, and make assumptions. Probably. Caleb, I can't. If your family thinks we're together and we're not, it's going to be awkward for everyone. So we tell them the truth, that we're friends helping each other out. Will they believe that? Does it matter?" Nora thought about Caleb's mother, the woman who'd set them up on that blind date, who'd seen something in Nora worth introducing to her son. What would she think seeing them now? Living together, raising kids under the same roof, functioning like a unit? "When does she want to come?" Nora asked finally. "This weekend. Saturday afternoon." "Okay, we'll make it work." But Nora spent the next 3 days anxiety cleaning the apartment and rehearsing explanations that sounded less insane than the reality. Saturday arrived too quickly. Caleb's mother showed up at 2 with Sarah in tow, both women armed with casseroles and opinions. Catherine Hart was exactly what Nora expected. Warm, observant, and immediately focused on the baby sleeping in her bassinet. "Oh, she's precious," Catherine breathed, bending over to look at Eliza. "Look at all that dark hair." "She's a good baby," Nora said, hovering nervously. "Sleeps in 3-hour stretches now." "That's wonderful for 2 weeks old. You must be exhausted, though." "I'm managing." Catherine straightened and really looked at Nora, the kind of maternal assessment that missed nothing. "You look tired, honey. Are you getting enough help?" "Caleb's been amazing. And Sarah brought over supplies. I couldn't have done this without them." "So you're staying here? Caleb mentioned you needed a place temporarily." "Yes. Just until I find something more permanent." Caleb was kind enough to offer his spare room. Catherine glanced around the apartment, noting the baby supplies integrated into the living room, Nora's shoes by the door, the organized chaos of shared space. Her expression was carefully neutral. "That's very generous of my son. He's been a lifesaver." They sat down for coffee, decaf for Nora, who was still nursing, and the conversation moved to safer territory. Miles and his kindergarten adventures, Sarah's new job, the latest family gossip. But Nora could feel Catherine's attention circling back, waiting for the right moment to ask what she really wanted to know. It came when Caleb went to check on Miles, leaving the 3 women alone. "How long have you known my son?" Catherine asked. "About 2 months. We met at that coffee shop you set us up at." "And you're living together after 2 months." It wasn't a question, but Nora answered anyway. "It's not what it looks like. We're just friends. He offered me a place to stay when I got displaced, and I accepted because I didn't have other options." "Honey, I'm not judging. I'm just trying to understand." "Understand what?" "Why my son looks at you like you hung the moon, and you're pretending not to notice." The words landed like a slap. Nora felt her face heat. We're not..." I've known Caleb for 32 years, Catherine interrupted gently. I know what he looks like when he's just being nice. This isn't that. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Mom, maybe this isn't the time. No, she should know. Catherine turned back to Nora. My son spent 3 years after his divorce disappearing into himself. Wouldn't talk about his feelings, wouldn't let anyone close, just focused on Miles and worked like the rest of the world didn't exist. Then he met you, and suddenly he's taking days off to help with hospital visits. He's rearranging his entire life to make room for someone else. That's not friendship, honey. That's love. Nora felt tears threaten. Even if that were true, which I'm not saying it is, it doesn't matter. I can't be what he needs right now. I just had a baby. I'm broke, displaced, and barely holding my life together. The last thing I should be thinking about is romance. Who said anything about romance? Catherine's smile was knowing. Love doesn't always look like flowers and dates. Sometimes it looks like holding someone's hand through labor. Sometimes it's folding laundry at midnight and splitting grocery bills. Sometimes it's just showing up day after day because you can't imagine being anywhere else. That's... Nora stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Exactly what you two have been doing, Sarah finished quietly. Mom's right. I've watched you together. The way you move around each other in the kitchen, how you trade off with the kids without discussing it. You're already a unit. You just haven't admitted it yet. It's too soon, too complicated, too real, Catherine suggested. Honey, real is scary, but it's also the only thing worth having. Before Nora could respond, Caleb came back with Miles, who immediately demanded his grandmother's attention. The conversation shifted, but Catherine's words stayed with Nora like a splinter. That night, after Catherine and Sarah left and Miles was in bed, Nora found Caleb cleaning up the kitchen. She picked up a dish towel and started drying while he washed. Your mom cornered me, she said. Yeah? What about? Us. She thinks... Nora paused, choosing words carefully. She thinks there's more happening here than we're admitting. Caleb's hand stilled in the soapy water. What did you tell her? That we're friends, that this is temporary, that it's not what it looks like. Is that true? The question hung between them, weighted with everything they'd been avoiding. Nora could lie, could protect the fragile peace they'd built, could keep things simple and safe and undefined. Or she could be honest. I don't know, she said finally. Is it? Caleb turns to face her, water dripping from his hands. Do you want it to be? I don't know what I want. I'm 2 weeks postpartum with a newborn and no plan beyond surviving to next month. I can't think about complicated feelings when I'm barely managing basic life functions. That's fair. But Nora forced herself to continue. Your mom said something that stuck with me, about how love doesn't always look like romance. Sometimes it just looks like showing up. She's right. You've been showing up for me since the day we met, even when you didn't have to, even when it would have been easier to walk away. Because I wanted to be here. Why? Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and Nora saw everything he'd been hiding written on his face. The tenderness, the fear, the hope he was trying so hard to contain. Because being around you makes me want to be braver, he said quietly. Because you looked at my mess of a life and didn't flinch. Because Miles adores you, and Eliza feels like... He stopped, swallowed hard. She feels like she's mine too. And I know she's not. I know I don't have any claim to her or to you, but when I hold her at 3 a.m, or when I watch you rock her to sleep, or when Miles reads her his dinosaur books, it feels like family, real family, not the broken kind I had before, the kind I didn't know I was allowed to want. Nora's vision blurred. Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for anything to change. I wanted you to know that showing up for you isn't charity. It's not obligation. It's the easiest thing I've ever done because it's where I want to be. For a long moment, Nora couldn't speak. Then she set down the dish towel, closed the distance between them, and wrapped her arms around him. Caleb held her carefully, like she might break, like she was precious. I'm scared, she whispered against his shoulder. Me too. I don't want to mess this up. Then we'll be careful. We'll go slow. We'll figure it out together. What if we can't? Then at least we tried. Nora pulled back enough to see his face. Your mom's terrifying. That surprised a laugh out of him. Yeah, she is. But she's not wrong. About us. About what this is. What is it? I don't know yet. But it's not nothing, and I'm tired of pretending it is. Caleb's smile was soft and genuine and absolutely devastating. Me too. They stood in the kitchen with dish soap drying on their hands and two sleeping children down the hall, and Nora felt the future shift from impossible to merely terrifying, which, considering everything, felt like progress. The next morning arrived with Eliza's hungry cries at 5:30, and Nora woke feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. She and Caleb had stood in the kitchen and admitted, finally, terrifyingly, that this thing between them was real, not defined yet, not labeled, but undeniably real. She fed Eliza in the pre-dawn quiet, watching her daughter's unfocused eyes drift closed with milk-drunk satisfaction, and tried to process what happened next. They'd agreed to go slow, to be careful. But what did that actually mean when they were already living together, already functioning like a family? Caleb appeared in her doorway around 6, hair disheveled from sleep, and the sight of him made her heart do something complicated. "Morning," he said softly. "You okay?" "Tired, confused, terrified. The usual." "Same." He leaned against the doorframe. "We should probably talk about last night." "Probably." "But maybe after coffee?" "Definitely after coffee." They smiled at each other, tentative and new, and Nora felt the fear ease slightly. Whatever this was, at least they were in it together. The weekend passed in domestic routine with an undercurrent of awareness that hadn't been there before. Caleb made pancakes for breakfast while Nora fed Eliza. They took Miles to the park and watched him climb on equipment with fearless abandon. They ordered pizza for dinner and argued good-naturedly about toppings. Everything was the same. Everything was different. Sunday evening, after Miles was asleep and Eliza was down for what would probably be a 90-minute stretch, they finally sat down to actually talk. "So," Caleb began, then stopped. "I don't actually know how to do this." "Me neither. I've never—" Nora gestured vaguely between them. "This isn't exactly a normal situation." "No, but maybe that's okay. Maybe normal is overrated." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one who just had a baby and is living in someone else's apartment while trying to figure out if friendship is turning into something else." "True. I'm just the person who invited a woman I barely knew to move in and then caught feelings somewhere between midnight diaper changes and museum trips." Nora laughed, despite her nerves. "When you put it that way, we both sound insane." "Completely. But here we are." "Here we are," she echoed. Then more seriously, "I meant what I said yesterday. I'm scared, Caleb, not of you, of messing this up, of hurting Miles, of building something that falls apart and leaves us all worse off than we started. Those are all legitimate fears. But I'm more scared of not trying, of looking back in 5 years and realizing I let fear win." Nora thought about that, about the life she could have if she was brave enough to reach for it. Not the fairy tale she'd imagined with David, but something better, something real and complicated and built on actual foundation instead of romantic fantasy. "I need time," she said carefully. "Not because I don't care about you, because I do. So much it terrifies me. But I'm barely a month postpartum. My hormones are everywhere. I'm not sleeping, and I can't trust my own judgment right now." "That's fair. What do you need?" "Space to figure out who I am as Eliza's mom before I try to be anything else. Time to get back on my feet financially. And—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I need to know this isn't just you trying to fix me. That you actually want me, not just the idea of saving someone." Caleb's expression went serious. "I'm not trying to fix you, Nora. You're not broken. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, and watching you navigate everything you've been through has been—" He stopped, collected himself. "It's been an honor. That's the only word that fits. You've let me be part of your life when you didn't have to, and I'm grateful for it. But I'm not here because I think you need rescuing. I'm here because being around you makes me better." The words settled over her like warmth. "Okay. Okay? Okay, we'll figure this out. Slowly, carefully, with lots of talking and probably some mistakes along the way. But we'll try." "We'll try," Caleb agreed. They sat together in the quiet apartment, not touching but close enough to feel each other's presence, and Nora thought maybe this was what Catherine had meant. Love that looked like showing up, like patience, like choosing each other every day even when things were hard. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of developmental milestones and slow revelation. Eliza started smiling, real smiles, not just gas, and the first one she gave was to Caleb during a 3 a.m. diaper change. Miles started reading simple books and insisted on reading to his baby sister every night before bed. Nora's maternity leave stretched toward its end, and the reality of returning to work loomed large. She and Caleb didn't rush anything. There were no grand declarations or dramatic moments, just small shifts, hands brushing while passing coffee cups, lingering looks across the dinner table, conversations that stretched late into the night after the kids were asleep. They learned each other in the mundane moments, building something steady instead of passionate. Then April arrived with warming weather and a phone call that changed everything. Nora was folding laundry when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Nora Lane?" The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes. Who's this?" "My name is Richard Chen. I'm an attorney representing David Morrison." Nora's blood went cold. "I don't want to talk to David. This isn't about reconciliation. David is getting married. His fiancée is uncomfortable with the ambiguity around his parental rights. He'd like to formalize the termination. He already terminated them when he sent me money and disappeared. Not legally. We'd like to file paperwork making it official. No custody, no visitation, no financial obligation beyond the initial settlement. In exchange, you'd sign documentation agreeing to those terms." Nora sat down hard. "You're saying he wants to legally erase Eliza." "I'm saying he wants clarity for his future family. This protects you too. No chance of him changing his mind later and seeking custody or visitation." "I need to think about it." "Of course. I'll email you the preliminary documents. Take your time. Consult your own attorney if you'd like. But Ms. Lane, this is probably the cleanest ending you're going to get." He hung up before she could respond. Nora sat staring at her phone, emotions churning, anger that David couldn't even call her himself, relief that he wanted nothing to do with them, sadness that Eliza would grow up knowing her father chose to walk away, and underneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that made her want to scream. Caleb found her 20 minutes later, still holding her phone, laundry forgotten. What happened? She told him everything, the lawyer, the documents, David's engagement, and desire for a clean slate. Caleb listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each detail. "What do you want to do?" he asked when she finished. "I want to tell him to go to hell. I want to throw his money back in his face and make him actually be accountable for creating a human being. I want—" Her voice broke. "I want Eliza to have a father who wants her." "She does." Nora looked up sharply. Caleb was watching her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. "I know I'm not her biological father," he continued. "I know I don't have any legal claim to her, but Nora, I've been there since before she was born. I held your hand through labor. I've done midnight feedings and diaper changes and held her when she cries. I've loved her since the moment I saw her on that ultrasound screen. So if you want her to have a father who wants her, I'm right here. I've been here, and I'm not going anywhere." Tears spilled over. "Caleb, sign the papers. Let David erase himself from her life. And when you're ready, whenever you're ready, let me be what he refused to be. Not because I'm trying to replace him, because I want to be her dad." That's a huge commitment. She's not even 2 months old. You don't know what you're signing up for. I raised a colicky infant through a divorce while working full-time. I know exactly what I'm signing up for. And I want it anyway. I want all of it. The sleepless nights and the terrible twos and the teenage years and college applications and everything in between. I want to be the one she calls when she's scared. I want to teach her to ride a bike and threaten her first boyfriend and walk her down the aisle someday if that's what she wants. I want to be her dad, Nora, if you'll let me. Nora couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process that this man, this beautiful, broken, brave man, was offering to be a father to her daughter not out of obligation, but out of love. "What about us?" she managed finally. "You're talking about forever. We haven't even been on a real date." "So let's go on a date, tonight. Sarah can watch the kids. We'll go to dinner like normal people and figure out if this thing between us is sustainable long term. And if it is, if you want what I want, then we'll figure out the rest together. And if it's not, then I'm still going to be Eliza's dad, because I'm not offering this conditionally. Whether you and I work out romantically or not, I want to be in her life. That's not about us. That's about her. It was exactly the right thing to say. Nora felt the last of her resistance crumble. Okay. Okay to the date? Okay to all of it. The date, the papers, you being Eliza's dad, all of it. Caleb crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. Nora let herself be held, let herself believe that maybe this impossible thing could actually work. That night, Sarah came over to babysit with a knowing smile and strict instructions to have fun. Caleb took Nora to a quiet Italian restaurant in their neighborhood, and for the first time since they'd met, they were just two people on a date. It should have been awkward, should have felt forced, but instead it felt like coming home. They talked about everything: childhood memories, college regrets, the worst jobs they'd ever had. Nora told him about growing up in a small Indiana town where everyone knew everyone's business. Caleb told her about the pressure of being the oldest son in a family that expected excellence. They discovered shared tastes in music, books, the kinds of movies that made them cry. Somewhere between appetizers and dessert, Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. I need to tell you something. Nora's heart jumped. Okay. I'm in love with you. I know we said we'd go slow, and I know this might be too much too soon, but sitting here with you, knowing what we're building, I can't not say it. I love you, Nora. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you love your daughter fiercely enough to upend your entire life for her. I love how you never give up even when everything's falling apart. I love... Caleb. Nora squeezed his hand. I love you too. He stopped mid-sentence. Yeah? Yeah. I think I have since you stood up to those women in the coffee shop, maybe even before that. I've just been too scared to admit it. And now? Now I'm still scared, but I'm more scared of losing this, of losing you. Caleb smiled, wide and genuine and absolutely devastating. You're not going to lose me. Promise? Promise. They finished dinner in a haze of happiness, paid the check, and walked home through the warming April night. When they reached the apartment, Sarah took one look at their faces and grinned. About time, she said, grabbing her purse. Kids were angels. Eliza's fed and sleeping. Miles made you a welcome home card. It's on the table. After she left, Caleb and Nora stood in the living room, suddenly uncertain. So, Nora said. So, we're doing this. Actually, doing this. Looks like it. She stepped closer. I've never dated someone I lived with before. Me neither. We're breaking all the rules. Think it'll work? I think we've already proven we're pretty good at figuring things out together. Nora laughed and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Miles's voice called from his room, Daddy, is Nora home? Yeah, buddy, we're home. Can she come say goodnight? Nora went to Miles's room and found him sitting up in bed, clutching Mr. Whiskers. Hey, dinosaur expert, what are you doing awake? I was waiting for you. Did you have fun on your date with Daddy? We did. How do you feel about that? Miles considered the question seriously. I think it's good. Daddy's happy when you're around, and I like having you here. It feels... He searched for the word. Complete. Nora's eyes stung. Yeah, baby. It does. Are you going to stay forever? Would you want that? Yes, and I think Eliza would too, even though she can't talk yet. Then, yeah, I'm going to stay forever. Miles beamed and settled back into his pillows. Good, because I already told my friends at school you're my other mom. Nora's breath caught. Miles, is that okay? You don't have to be if you don't want to, but you take care of me like a mom. And you love me, right? So much. Then you're my mom, and Eliza's mom, and Daddy's... He paused. What are you to Daddy? We're figuring that out, but I love him too. Then that makes us a family. It was the simplest truth Nora had ever heard. She kissed Miles's forehead and tucked him in properly. Good night, sweetheart. Good night, Mom. The word settled over her like a blessing. The following weeks were a study in adjustment. Nora signed David's termination papers and felt nothing but relief. She went back to work part-time, Sarah helped with childcare, and Caleb restructured his schedule to be home more. They figured out a system, trading off morning routines, sharing cooking duties, navigating the chaos of two kids under one roof. It wasn't perfect. They fought about dishes left in the sink and whose turn it was to do laundry. Nora had moments of postpartum anxiety that left her crying over nothing. Caleb struggled with the guilt of splitting his attention between Miles and Eliza, but they talked through it. They apologized when they screwed up. They showed up for each other day after day. 3 months after that first date, Caleb sat Nora down after the kids were asleep. "I want to make this official," he said. "Define official. I want to adopt Eliza. Legally. I want my name on her birth certificate alongside yours. I want her to be mine in every way that matters." Nora felt tears rise. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. It's going to be expensive. Legal fees, court dates. I don't care. She's my daughter. I want the paperwork to reflect that." So they hired a lawyer, filed the adoption petition, went through home studies and background checks and all the bureaucratic hoops the state required. It took 6 months of paperwork and waiting, but finally, on a cold November morning, they stood in front of a judge who made it official. Eliza Rose Lane became Eliza Rose Hart. In the courthouse hallway afterward, Caleb held his daughter, legally, officially his daughter, and cried. Nora took a picture of them. This man and this baby, who'd found each other through impossible circumstances, and felt her heart overflow. That night, after celebrating with family and putting the kids to bed, Caleb pulled Nora into the kitchen where everything had started. "I have one more question," he said. "Just one?" "For now." He took her hands. "Nora Lane, I know we did everything backward. Met on a blind date, moved in together, became parents before we were even dating. But somewhere in all that chaos, I fell completely in love with you. You make me braver. You make Miles happier. You've given me a family I didn't know I was allowed to want. So," he dropped to one knee. Nora's hands flew to her mouth. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and Miles and Eliza's dad and build this beautiful, messy life together officially?" She was crying now, but they were good tears, happy tears. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." He slid a simple ring onto her finger, nothing flashy, just a gold band with a small diamond that caught the kitchen light. Then he stood and kissed her, and Nora tasted salt from both their tears. They got married 3 months later in Sarah's backyard with 30 people, a simple ceremony, and 2 kids who served as the world's most enthusiastic wedding party. Miles carried the rings on a pillow shaped like a dinosaur. Eliza slept through the entire ceremony in Catherine's arms. And when the officiant pronounced them married, their chosen family, blood and otherwise, cheered loud enough to disturb the neighbors. That night, after the guests left and the kids were asleep, and the house was finally quiet, Nora and Caleb stood in the kitchen where so much had been decided. "We did it," Nora said. "We actually did it." "Was there ever any doubt?" "So much doubt, like constant doubt." Caleb laughed and pulled her close. "Same. But we figured it out. I think we'll keep figuring it out. I think we don't have much choice. Life's going to keep throwing stuff at us. But yeah, I think as long as we keep showing up for each other, we'll be okay." Nora thought about that first coffee shop date, when she'd walked in 7 months pregnant and certain she'd be rejected. She thought about Caleb standing up to those women, about him offering her a place to stay, about him holding Eliza at 3 in the morning like she was precious. She thought about all the small moments that had built this life, the museum trips and midnight conversations and fights about laundry and forgiveness that came easy because the love underneath was real. "I used to think love was supposed to look a certain way," she said quietly. "First comes romance, then comes trust, then comes commitment. But we did it all out of order and it still worked. Better than worked. We built something real." "Yeah, we did." From down the hall, Eliza started fussing, not crying, just making the small sounds that meant she'd be hungry soon. Nora started to move, but Caleb stopped her. "I've got her. You've been on your feet all day. It's our wedding night. You're supposed to be romantic, not changing diapers." "Who says I can't do both?" He kissed her softly, then went to get their daughter. Nora watched him go. This man who'd chosen her when he could have run who'd chosen Eliza when he could have walked away, who'd chosen brave over safe every single time it mattered. Through the doorway, she could hear him talking to Eliza in that soft voice he reserved for quiet moments. "Hey, sweet girl, you're supposed to be sleeping. What's going on? You hungry?" "Yeah, I thought so. Let's go find Mama." Mama. The word still made her chest tight with wonder. Caleb came back carrying Eliza, who was making her hungry sounds more insistently now. He passed her to Nora with practiced ease, and she settled into the nursing chair they'd moved into their bedroom. "You know what Miles asked me before the wedding?" Caleb said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "What?" "He asked if getting married meant we'd be a family forever, or if it was like when I married his mom, and then we stopped being married." Nora's heart clenched. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that marriage doesn't make a family. Love does. And we've been a family since the day Nora came to live with us. The wedding just makes it official for the paperwork people." "That's a good answer." He seemed satisfied. Then he asked if Eliza could be the ring bearer at his wedding someday. "He's 5. He's optimistic," Caleb smiled. "But it made me think about the future, about what we're building here, and I realized I'm not scared anymore. No. I used to be terrified of commitment because I thought it meant being trapped. But this doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like freedom, like I finally found the place I'm supposed to be." Nora looked at him, at the way the lamplight caught in his hair, at the softness in his expression as he watched their daughter nurse, at the quiet contentment that had replaced the fear she'd seen that first day in the coffee shop. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." They sat together in the peaceful quiet, this family they'd built from broken pieces and brave choices. Outside, the city hummed its nighttime song. Inside, a baby nursed and a little boy dreamed of dinosaurs, and two people who'd almost missed each other held steady to what they'd found. It wasn't the story Nora had imagined. It was better, because it was real. It was hard-won, and it was theirs. Eliza finished nursing and made a small, satisfied sound. Nora burped her gently, then passed her to Caleb, who settled their daughter against his shoulder with the easy confidence of practice. "I'll put her down," he said. "You should sleep. Tomorrow Miles is going to wake up at dawn demanding to know if we're different now that we're married." "Are we?" "Not different, just more official." "I can live with that." Caleb took Eliza to her crib, and Nora climbed into bed. Their bed, in their home, surrounded by the family they'd chosen. She heard him humming softly in the next room, the same wordless melody he'd used to soothe Eliza that first night. Heard Miles sigh in his sleep down the hall. Heard the radiator clank and the city breathe and the ordinary sounds of a life she'd stopped believing she could have. When Caleb came back, he slid into bed beside her and pulled her close. "Thank you," she said against his shoulder. "For what?" "For sitting down at that coffee shop. For not running. For being the kind of brave I needed to see. Thank you for letting me. For trusting me with your daughter. With your heart." "Our daughter." "Our daughter," he agreed. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, a family made real by choice and commitment, and the kind of love that showed up in midnight feedings and grocery lists and promises kept even when keeping them was hard. And in the morning, when Miles burst into their room demanding pancakes, and Eliza woke hungry and the chaos of family life resumed, they faced it together. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but together, always together. And that made all the difference.